This season, Instacart has your back to school. As in, they've got your back to school lunch favorites, like snack packs and fresh fruit. And they've got your back to school supplies, like backpacks, binders, and pencils. And they've got your back when your kid casually tells you they have a huge school project due tomorrow. Let's face it, we were all that kid. So first call your parents to say I'm sorry, and then download the Instacart app to get delivery in as fast as 30 minutes all school year long. Get a $0 delivery fee for your first 3 orders while supplies last. Minimum $10 per order. Additional terms apply.
And welcome back to Scarred for Life, the podcast where we open up old wounds by looking back at the films that scared us as kids. I'm Terry.
And I'm Mary Beth.
And each episode, our special guest brings with them a movie that traumatized them as a child.
This week, we are so excited because our guest is writer and director Alejandro Brugués, whose latest film, The Inheritance, is out now in select theaters and on VOD. He's also directed films such as One of the Dead and segments in anthology films such as Nightmare Cinema and Satanic Hispanics, which just was nominated for a Chainsaw Award. Hell yeah, congratulations, and welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. So first things first, it's Brugués.
Brugués?
Brugués.
Okay.
With the G. Okay, the Brugués.
Yeah, guess. Yeah.
Damn it.
Yeah. I mean, you were close. But
I was going back and forth on the G. I wasn't sure, but okay. Yeah. Now I know. I know for the future.
Yeah, and I just found out about the Chainsaw nomination. I was just chatting with Mike Mendes. We're very excited.
It's amazing.
Congratulations. So exciting.
Well deserved. I did love that.
It's a great list. I don't know what we're doing on that list, but it's a great list. Yeah, I was also telling Demián Rugna, because I mean we have him in Satanic Hispanics, but he's also nominated with When Evil Lurks, and he didn't see all the nominations, so I was like, you're nominated to all this stuff, and I'm voting for you and everything except on that one. I mean, he deserves everything, but screw him.
Exactly.
He's too good at making scary stuff, but also you're good at making scary stuff. Can you tell us a little bit about your new movie, The Inheritance?
The Inheritance. So that's a screenplay by Joe Russo and Chris Lamont, and Joe and I have known each other for many years. He was a producer on Nightmare Cinema, and we were trying to find something else to do together, and he sent me that one day, and he was like, this movie is happening, do you want to go for it? And I read it, and I loved it. I loved how it was fast, how it was like a lot of stuff happening, how it had all these cool set pieces. So yeah, like I met for it, and 1 month later I was going to Vancouver to start prepping.
Oh wow!
What else can I say? It's an interesting mix between who done it, well, hasn't done it yet. It's a murder mystery, I guess. Except the murder hasn't happened yet. Mixed with a horror movie, and I like blending genres. So it seemed like a nice fit.
Yeah. So you've definitely throughout your career have definitely blended genres, and so when I saw this, and I was like, okay, this is giving me a little bit of Evil Dead, which is kind of interesting. To spoiler alert for what we're going to talk about later, but it's a little bit of like Evil Dead. It's set in a house that kind of feels like it could be ripped out of Knives Out. So like I love the mixing of sort of the mystery at the center of what is happening, with like a tinge of kind of cosmic horror, but then a little bit of the zaniness of Evil Dead. So we had Joe on the podcast. He's a former guest of the show too, and
I'm sorry.
But I love that you guys continue to work together. What is that like? Do you guys just seem to gravitate toward each other's style, or?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few collaborators like him or Mike Mendes. We have worked together in several things, and I guess we have like similar sensibilities, and for some reason, as hard as I try, I cannot get rid of them. So that's one of the things with Joe. We have like the same tastes in movies. We not always agree. But pretty much. But I think mainly it's that we had a blast working together in Nightmare Cinema, so we decided to do it again. Sadly, he couldn't be on set. Well, sadly, he couldn't be on set because of COVID restrictions when we shot. But yeah, I think it's that. It's the love of horror for horror uniting us.
Hell yeah.
I have to ask, the house is striking in this. How did you guys come across this house? And did you actually were you able to film in the house? Because it's gorgeous.
It's well, I think the answer for that is accidentally. We were supposed to shoot in Vancouver, and I had cobbled the house together because the house that was written in the screenplay was very specific, and we couldn't find anything like that in Vancouver certainly. And but like at the last minute, we had to switch locations, and we moved to Victoria. And in Victoria, we had these three amazing locations, and the house is a mix of those three places, and which, by the way, you have seen in other movies, some of them. But yeah, it was like a mix of those locations, and essentially the moment we went to Victoria, that's why I'm saying accidentally. It's like I didn't have much choice. It was those places, and that was it. So I was like, okay, how do I adapt this screenplay to these locations that we have now? And which was very tricky because the screenplay had a lot of hallways. It was a bunch of hallways and very horizontal. And suddenly we found ourselves in this house that had a lot of stairs. So I had like shots and everything I wanted to do, and basically I had to flip that horizontally and be like, okay, how do we do this now? Yeah, it was weird. No, it wasn't cool. It was breaking everyone's head. I think at some point I was the only one that knew which room, which hallway, which stair, everything was happening. Like the AD would be like, "What hallway is this? Is hallway 6?" It's like, no, this is 4, and that's a stairway 6.
You have like a conspiracy theory board of all of like a map of where all of the hallways are, and you're like, no, you're pointing out all the hallways.
Well, but that was part of a thing since the screenplay. It was a house where you could get lost, and yeah, we embraced that.
That's cool. That's so cool. Like, I know that it's something people do, but just the idea of being able to use 3 different locations and make them feel so cohesive, while also incredibly brain breaking in the edit and making the film. It's rad to see how that comes together though in the final product.
Oh, we had a fantastic editor. Yeah. Steve Mirkovich. One of his first movies was Big Trouble in Little China. Like I was like, when we were looking at names, I was like, I want Steve. Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah,
that's
lots of good stories in the editing room. Yeah,
that's amazing. Well, so I'm curious about, how did you get introduced to the horror genre? Has it been something you've always loved, or when did it come into your life?
I think since I was a kid, I started watching horror movies, and I was fascinated by them. And this is okay. So this is Cuba in the 80s. So it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy to find horror movies. But then my parents were diplomats, so we were traveling a lot, and I would even being such a little kid, before I was 10, I was doing everything I could where we were, try to find all the horror movies. Like if I had a video store near our home, I would be watching every horror movie in that video store. And back then I was pretty good at horror trivia. Like growing up, I knew everything and all that. Like I had forgotten. But yeah, I would really try to watch every horror movie, and I just loved it. And I actually never. So here's the thing: I never thought about making a horror movie until I did one. And then I have never seen myself only as a horror filmmaker. It's the only thing that I have been able to do mostly, but because the industry is the way it is, and sometimes you want to do something different, and they are like, no,
Yeah.
but you're a horror guy, so it's tricky, and I
Mm.
still have to. I'm still trying to get out of the horror box, but it's a box I love anyway, so it's like I'm fine and I'm
Yeah.
comfortable here. But yeah, that was the start as a kid, watching every horror movie that I could. I mean, back then I
Awesome.
didn't even know movies were things you made or even dreamed about being a
Yeah.
filmmaker. That was an accident at some point. But that's my life. It's somehow accidents, and I land on my feet somehow. Yeah,
So,
failing upwards.
no, definitely not. Definitely not. So I'm curious because you mentioned growing up in Cuba in the 80s, hard to get access to movies. I'm curious what movie selection there was in Cuba at that time. Was it limited?
It wasn't even a movie selection. It was literally whatever you could see, because like back in the day, it's not like you could see a lot of American movies.
Mhm.
So it was mostly stuff like Jaws, which is still my favorite movie. It should be everyone's favorite movie.
I agree.
The Exorcist, some things that I remember like watching like at midnight. For some reason, my parents were asleep and I wasn't, and I would watch whatever was on TV. And I remember there were two that it took me lots of years to figure out which ones they were, because I could only remember some images. And when I was at film school, I had to like talk to people that knew and track them down, which and ended up being one was Zombie 2 by Lucio Fulci, which
Ah,
I would remember the eye, and
yep.
also the bridge at the end. And the other one was The Fearless Vampire Killers by Roman Polanski, which as a kid I thought it was a horror movie. It really scared me. All those vampires with so many teeth and just like biting you anywhere and all that. But I guess somehow I felt that it was also a comedy, and I think that's one of the movies that I blame for my taste for horror comedies. So it would be anything that I could watch. Now, specifically, I mean, as I grew older, it was easier to find movies, a little bit easier. Still, there's this time in the late 80s, early 90s that it was really hard, and I had an uncle, but we're gonna get into my uncle later. That would bring movies sometimes, and he knew I liked horror, so he would bring me some. Right now, you're thinking, "Oh, what a cool uncle," but when we get into that later, you'll be like, "Oh no, that's terrible." But I luckily I was able to travel and see other movies outside, and that's how I watch. Like I was really into slashers back then, but I guess everyone
Okay.
was.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
the
it's the
80s had a
decade
lot
for
of
him.
yeah, it's a good time for slashers, and I would watch every slasher that I could. I would be counting how many deaths, because that was the most important thing for me, probably.
Yep.
And but I would watch any horror movie that I could.
Were you easily scared when you watched them? Like, did they scare you, or did you were not? Yeah.
I when I was younger, like a little kid, under 10, I was scared. Like I remember watching some with I mean I watched Evil Dead with the door open so I could run out of the room. And there were some that I watched like that. Right now, I'm still scared a lot with lots of movies. Like I don't know, like there's some James Wan
Cool.
stuff that I have to look away all the time, because as a filmmaker, you know where the scares are coming, so you're like, oh, I know something's coming. I don't want to. It's like a roller coaster. It's like a roller coaster when it's going up and you close your eyes, because I do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's something like that. I do that a lot actually. When I'm in the theater and you sense that a scare is coming, sometimes you can feel the build up, or you can see the framing and you can see that it's framed to leave room for a scare, and then I look away, everyone screams, and I look back. And
That's
then
amazing.
back home, knowing that there was a scare there, I can watch it again. So I get scared
Oh,
with horror movies. Not with everything, obviously. I think there's a very specific kind of horror movie that I still find scary in that sense. There's a bunch of stuff now that I enjoy, but I don't find scary.
what do you find scary? Like, what is that specifically?
I think it's that kind of jump scare because you know something's gonna come, and it's the
Mm-hmm.
combination of where is it coming from, plus the sound when you're in the theater. Essentially, with a good scare in the theater, you can close your eyes and still be scared because it's gonna be the build up and the sound so loud,
Yeah.
and that kind of thing. Mm, there's other experiences where I remember people being scared, but I wasn't. And it's stuff like Hereditary in Hereditary when you see the
Yeah.
mom in the ceiling, when you suddenly your eyes start adjusting for the darkness, and everyone is like, oh my God, it's there. And I'm like, yeah, it's there. But it's not scaring me. So I don't know. It's I think it's different for everyone. There were other good scares in that one, but you know.
That's hilarious that you say that though, because honestly, whenever we ask the question, which we're about ready to ask you, is what's the last movie that scared you? A lot of times Hereditary comes up and everyone talks about the scene where she is up on the wall like a spider and you start to
Yeah.
adjust to it. And that scene always comes up on this podcast, it seems like. But so I think that's funny that that's not something that scared you, because that was a moment that was great in the movie theater where people started
Oh,
to.
it was fantastic. I think I hadn't noticed, and I started hearing people around me and was like, oh yeah, she's there. But you know, it's no, but I think there's different things that scare you, and
Yeah.
as I get older, and like for instance, going back to um, Demián Rugna, that asshole that has so many nominations. When Evil Lurks, that
Oh,
movie fucked me up.
yeah.
And the thing about the Mian is that you have the scene with the dog, and you know it's coming,
Oh.
but then it comes, and it fucks you up for the rest of the movie because you know
Yep.
that something bad could happen, and those are kids. And now I am a father, so I'm scared about the thing happening to the kids. So even though he's not doing any jump scare in that movie, you still have that. And by the way, speaking of him, he's so good at scares. I fucking hate him.
Yeah.
Um, but you watch Terrified, and that's jump scare after jump scare, and they are so well done. And he's fantastic at that. So I think it depends. There's different things that I find scary. But for instance, I don't find slashers scary. I don't find
Yeah.
the vampire movies scary. I enjoy them, but
Mhm.
it's not the kind of thing that's gonna make me jump in a theater. Um, there are some genres that I really enjoy as a horror lover, but I don't necessarily find scary.
Yeah.
Mm.
Same. It's so funny too because Terrified always comes up as well. And recently we've started to get When Evil Lurks coming up. And those are both I'm you talk about being a father and having kids and stuff, and he really says fuck them kids in both of his movies.
Oh yeah, I had to moderate the Q&A with him when Terrified opened here, and he didn't let me watch the movie before. First time I saw the movie was there in the theater, and my first question was like, Demian, what the fuck?
Yeah,
Oh,
it's a very valid question.
I mean, yeah, it is a
yeah,
very valid question. Like,
yeah, yeah.
bud, what's going on? What is going on?
Yeah, what's wrong with you? Is there anything you want to talk? Mm. But I have to say, I mean, I really admire that asshole. I love him, and maybe we'll get to how I got him for Satanic Hispanics. But one thing that also has been fascinating because we're working on something now together, and it's fascinating seeing how his mind worked, and you could
Oh,
see how he
really?
could, yeah, you could see how his how he can make that kind of movie that really scares you and in so many different levels.
That's so cool. I met him at Fantastic Fest, and he is a delightful human being. So,
He's
and it's so
not. He's
funny.
an
He's
asshole.
like, I met him, and he said it was like bright and early. He was like, "I'm so sorry. I'm not as scary as you think I am." It was really fun. It was
Yeah.
very
No, he's not
sweet.
scary. Yeah, I don't know. The other day we were doing a meeting, and in the couch behind him was the guy from When Evil Lurks, like the song. You know which one? Yeah. So that
Oh.
was like really impressive. Like you have that on your couch.
Oh my God. Ooh, wow.
What do you do? What do you do when no one's looking? And he also, I know what I would do. And he also had the kid from Terrified, and he would leave it in the living room when he left home. So if someone tried
Absolutely not.
to break in his house, they would freak out and leave. So yeah, I don't have that kind of prop. I have some stuff from my movies, The Hammer of Zanzibar and stupid shit like that, but not that. Yeah.
Okay. Wow, incredible. Well, okay, we've talked about the inheritance. We've talked about your horror history, but Alejandro, what film did you bring with you today for us to discuss?
The Evil Dead,
Hell yeah.
Yes.
the first one, because for
The
some reason,
original.
which I mean, I guess I understand why no one has done that before, but it's still puzzling. I mean, if I had to rank the Evil Deads, that's probably not my favorite, but it's the one that fucked me up as a kid.
Hell yeah. So if you are not familiar with Evil Dead, and I hope you all are, in the film, this is Sam Raimi's debut feature. 5 friends travel to a cabin in the woods where they unknowingly release flesh-possessing demons.
All right. So take us back, Alejandro. How old were you when you saw this? How did you see this? You mentioned your uncle. What about this is your Scarred for Life pick? Give us your horror story, because I'm so excited to finally talk about this movie.
It's not the first horror movie I saw. I can't remember which one would have been the first, but I'm pretty sure it wasn't the first because I know I was into horror back then. So I had this uncle, which we have mentioned, and he would show up with different kinds of movies. Sometimes, mostly it was like Bruce Lee movies, which I loved. But sometimes he could show up with Deep Throat.
Oh no,
Yeah.
really?
I mean, it's Cuba in the 80s, you don't know. And I guess he's my family version of the algorithm. Since you like this, you might also like this. And in this case, he showed up with Evil Dead, thankfully.
Wow.
And I didn't know what to expect. It had a really cool title in Spanish. And me and all my friends sat down to watch it, and I remember all of us running out of the room screaming. And it was one of those movies that my friends would come home and they would be like, "Let's watch that again," and we would. It's like, yeah, I was a cool kid. I had Evil Dead. I also had Deep Throat. I don't think he left that. I think my dad probably intervened. Maybe, I don't know. But hey, it's a good double feature. By the way, that also scarred me. I don't know why I chose Evil Dead. I could have gone with that one. I guess it's a horror
That would have been
podcast.
incredible. Deep Throat
Yeah.
as it
Yeah, I think I'm talking too much. Please jump in. Cut me. Cut me.
No, this is
Mute
amazing.
him.
This
Take
is
him away.
amazing.
Yeah, no, it's not. Mariana is probably like, shut him up. Shut him down. No. But
That's
yeah, it's
incredible.
yeah, that's the story of how I ran into Evil Dead.
Wow.
Hell
I was
yeah.
8 years old. I was 8 years old.
8 years
Which
old.
which is also not a good age to watch Deep Throat. It's probably
also true.
Yeah, it's probably not a good age to watch any of those.
Wow.
Mm.
Wow.
Okay, incredible.
So did it sounded like you had a bunch of friends over to watch it for the first time.
Yeah.
Did you remember what scene caused you all to like flee the room?
Hmm, I don't, but I'm pretty sure. I mean, I'm pretty sure it was any of the Deadite things, probably the Dismembered, but I'm pretty sure we enjoyed that one. But it must have been some of the Deadite stuff. I don't remember. I do remember that with Evil Dead 2, it was the eye. So I'm pretty sure it was something similar in this one.
Yeah. I Mary Beth, when did you see this movie for the first time?
So this is one of the movies that my now husband used to court me in college.
Oh, nice.
Yes. And obviously it worked because now we've been together for almost 12 years. But he knew I loved horror movies and he was like, my favorite's The Evil Dead. I'm like, oh, I've never seen The Evil Dead. And he was like, I have to show you. And he showed him to me. And that was like one of our first dates was him in a bed. Like we made dinner and watched The Evil Dead in his dorm room.
Oh,
And I
nice.
loved it. I was obsessed. And I was like, oh wow, I found for someone who like can match, as the kids say, match my freak. I found someone who could match my
Oh,
freak with The Evil Dead. So yeah, that was one of the first like one of my first dates with him actually was watching The Evil Dead on a shitty dorm room television, as just the way Sam Raimi intended.
intended. Yeah. Yeah.
And then one of the
Wow.
first gifts I got him was like a Necronomicon 4K set. It was like a really nice like set of movies. I got that. It was one of the first gifts I ever
Oh,
got
I think
him.
I have that.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, I think I brought that. Wait, no. No, do I have the Necronomicon one? I have the 4 set, but I don't know if it's that one. Huh. I have to check.
Yeah.
I have to check.
I don't know where it ended up, but I had the first one with the kind of rubber container that apparently if you put in the freezer and take out, it's supposed to feel like clammy flesh. Like I had that somewhere.
What the fuck?
Yeah, that was one of the selling features when it first came out.
Putting that in a freezer? Who the fuck is putting that in a freezer? That's disgusting.
Coincidentally,
Anyway, so.
there's a special edition
Okay.
of Deep Throat that you can do the same. Oh, this is going so wrong. And by the way, I forgot to ask, but I mean, you should bring that up with your husband now. Hey, what other movies did you have in mind?
When he pulled that out as the next one.
I hear it's a great double feature.
Yes, and this is why we never invite Alejandro to any podcast anymore.
This is why we invite Alejandro to every podcast.
Exactly. Oh,
yeah,
wow.
that's how I watched it. I came to this in college, and it was like it's been like kind of our wedding tables were named after like The Evil Dead was one of our wedding tables at our wedding.
Oh, nice. That's cool. I wanted when my first kid was about to being born, like we were literally in the hospital. I did a last push effort to add Ash as a second name. I failed.
Oh, I love that
Yeah.
you tried though.
Tried.
Yeah, and 1 week
Were you
later,
doing Ash or
I remember
Ashley?
Ash. I remember I remember 1 week later I was pitching something with Sam Raimi. Not like we were pitching something together. We had a project together, and I was telling him that we tried, like I tried to do that.
Oh,
I think, yeah. No. That was really cool.
I was
wow.
gonna say, what a cool moment to be like, hello, I almost named my child after a movie you made that I watched as a like that's so cool.
I mean, I think I bring up every time I talk to him. He knows I love Evil Dead. I actually, my segment in Satanic Hispanics, the Hammer of Zanzibar, I first pitched that to him because I wanted to make it like an Evil Dead spin-off. Yeah,
That would have been so
which
good.
obviously never happened because back then Lee Cronin, I didn't know, but Lee Cronin was already working on his Evil Dead, and they were like they had too many Evil Dead. Now it seems like everyone has an Evil Dead except me. So yeah, I don't know. I have to fix that.
Petition for Alejandro to make an Evil Dead movie.
Please.
I mean, I'll make them fun again.
Exactly.
They are fun. They are fun, but
They're
they
fun,
still,
but
they
they're not
are
like Evil
fun.
Dead. too
Yeah,
fun.
they are fun, but they are like still. I mean, Fedes is not fun. I admire Fedes, like a badass horror movie, but it's not fun.
Yeah.
It's not fun in the sense that it doesn't have the humor, you know? It's still fun to
No,
see
yeah.
everything, but
It's
yeah.
just brutal.
Lee Cronin's has a little bit more humor. It's a bit more fun, but it's still like they are still in the dark space
Yeah.
of Evil Dead, and yeah, it's like give me that shit. I'm gonna go nuts again.
I was trying to remember when I first saw The Evil Dead because for some reason, I have like memories of seeing the tree sequence, and I don't know why. I don't remember if I got to that as a young kid and just went, I can't handle this and turned it off. But what I've realized is I'm like thinking back about movies that we've covered on the podcast, I would always tend to try to watch the first movie, and when it scared me I would stop, and then I would watch the second movie
Mhm.
and I'd be okay. I this is something that I've only just started realizing now because um I did it with Psycho, I did it with Alien, I did it with Critters, and I think there was the same thing here. I might have seen like the first scene and was like, I can't handle this, and I would have been probably 8 at the time, and I was like, I can't handle this. And so I didn't even think about this movie for the longest time until I was in high school and my friends wanted to watch The Army of Darkness. And I sat down to watch it thinking that this was like a standalone movie. And it opens up, of course, with like how the second one ended. And I was like, what is this? This is connected to a movie that is like in the back of my brain for some reason with this character and whatnot. But yeah, it's wild how sometimes things in your memory when you're looking back on it, you're trying to figure out what was the timeline for it, and it's just impossible. But I have to say this is probably for the longest time this was my favorite of the Evil Dead movies. I for some reason the second one was a little too zany for me as a
Oh.
kid, but as an
What?
adult I know I was like
There's
I
not
That's
think
so
such a thing.
funny.
I I know I think as like a kid I didn't understand that genre could be, mutable and changing. And so I was like,
Okay.
it has to be scary. And so I watched the first one. The first one scared the shit out of me. And the second one was like a Looney Tunes cartoon. And I don't think I could rationalize that in my head. Now as an adult, I love the second one a lot
I
more than the
think
first one. But
it's an interesting thing, and as someone, I mean, obviously, I do a lot of horror comedy, and sometimes you see people complaining like, "Oh, it wasn't horror; it was just funny," and I'm like, "Yeah."
Yeah.
But and there are some horror comedies that I don't remember. If I mean, obviously, Evil Dead 2 was scary for me as a kid, but because I was a kid. But like now I see it and I don't see the scares. I don't remember. I can't imagine what horrified me, but I find it like super funny. But also, there comes a moment where you realize that horror is always funny, even when you're trying to do something scary, even when you're trying to craft a scare, you're having fun. If you look at me when I'm writing and I have like a big smile on my face, I'm writing something horrifying. It's so much easier to write than a joke. And I don't know, it's always something that I find surprising how there are people that really enjoy horror comedies, and there are people that don't like their comedy in their horror. And that's always
Mhm.
something that I find puzzling. But also the first Evil Dead, it's not a comedy, not in that sense, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, like, I think that the part that is always the scariest to me, which it comes as no surprise, is the tree scene, the tree
Yeah,
sexual
obviously.
assault scene, obviously. And I know that Sam Raimi has expressed some regret having that scene in this film, correct? I feel like I've seen that before, but I'm not sure. I need to
Like,
make sure I have
I
that
mean,
right. But
I haven't seen it, but I understand that completely.
yeah.
Like, do you see that now? I rewatch it for this, and I was like, oh yeah, it's a rough scene.
it's a very rough scene.
Yeah, and it's like, but it's also so impressive though what they can accomplish, like how horrifying it is on low budget. And I think
Mm.
it's another really incredible example of like the power of low budget horror filmmaking and how I wish they would give filmmakers more money, because like look what we can do with so little resources. Like imagine what we could do with more. And it's like these sequences in this film are just so terrifying and done by just like some friends in the woods. And it's so incredible how this movie has
They
permeated horror history.
they also shot for 76 days or something, 73. I
Yeah,
don't
I know
know.
I knew it was a grueling shoot. Like it
Yeah,
was not.
it was a very, very long shoot. And
Yes.
by the way, I think Fede for his had the same amount of days. Obviously, he had a different budget. But he had the same amount of days. I wonder what it'd be like, because it's so hard, like, to try to make something. The thing about Evil Dead is that you cannot make it again, because
Yeah.
Yeah.
what Sam did, he was just going crazy, and you have these possessed, these monsters that are unlike anything that I had seen, and then you have stuff like that moment at the end when suddenly the arms start coming out of their bodies, and that kind of stuff that in the second one goes even further, like you chop a head and a bigger head comes out, and we don't have that kind of stuff anymore. And I feel like we try to ground things somehow, and it's amazing how, like, he had no money, and he was just a kid going crazy, and now this happens, and now this happens. And I think if you try to approach a movie like Evil Dead, you should do it like that. You shouldn't be bound by rules in the same sense that he was, and he was just going nuts and doing that
Yeah.
kind of thing. And also, I agree with you, but I think it's like the opposite. I don't think you should give filmmakers more money so they can do that kind of stuff. I think you should give them
Okay.
less so they have to figure it out, because
Fair. Hey,
because
okay.
yeah, but it's like Sam didn't have a big fancy steady or anything when he was doing those tracking shots. They just nailed the camera to a piece of wood and they were running around with it
Yeah.
and that kind of stuff. And I think there's something beautiful about that, because suddenly you're like, okay, I want to make this shot. And by the way, I have been in that position in Nightmare Cinema. I remember we wanted to do I wanted to do this spider point of view, and I said I want that to be like this shot in Evil Dead, because I always go back to Evil Dead. And they said, yeah, we have the guy that built the rigs for Raimi. He's gonna build something for you, and that was so cool. But at the same time, I had a rig. They didn't have that. They were. It's like making shit up, and I think that's the beauty of it. It's like you didn't have fancy toys to play with. You had to build them in order
Yeah.
to bring to life what was in your head. And I think there's something beautiful about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. On the other hand, you do need that kind of time to make a movie like that. You do need your 70 something days in order to get away with all of that. And now it's impossible to do that on that kind of budget. It's just
Yeah.
impossible. So,
Yeah, so I think what always takes me back every time I watch this movie is the effects. I love the effects in this, and particularly the moment when I think it's Linda gets the pencil in her ankle,
oh, yeah,
and then like
that
afterwards
hurts.
seeing it, yeah, seeing it
Oh,
sort of like spiral out of there. There's things in this movie that just it kind of touches into cosmic horror where it's like I don't I my brain cannot handle this. And I remember as a kid that scene in particular on this rewatch being like I don't know what is happening in this. This does not look real, but it looks somehow more terrifying than reality.
Yeah.
And there was one time where I think I might have created a scarred for life moment with a kid with this movie, because there was a time where I had a roommate and he was divorced and his kid would come to stay once in a while, and he came and I was downstairs in my living room watching Evil Dead, and he came in and he's like, what are you watching? And I was like, oh, the Evil Dead. And he's like, can I watch it? And I was like, well, I guess if you're up to it. This kid was probably like 9 or 10 at the time. And it was the part where I don't remember which one of them, but one of the women is possessed and she starts floating and her eyes are the white
Yeah.
orbs and stuff. And he just like ran out of the room and his father was very upset the next day that when he found out. And I was like, I watched it when
Yeah,
I was
it
8 or
was
something.
that or Deep Throat. What do you
Right,
prefer?
exactly.
Yeah, it's not,
The two options.
The two options. Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I don't remember. I don't remember which moment was the one for me. It was probably also one of those because that moment in front of the window when she starts levitating and all
Mhm.
that, it's a very harrowing moment for a kid to watch. But then you get something like chopped to pieces and that kind of thing. I don't know. It's there's a lot of stuff in that movie to really scare you.
And I will say it brought us Bruce Campbell.
Oh yeah.
And I fucking love Bruce Campbell. I I mean, obviously incredibly handsome, but also just so funny and so talented. And I'm very glad that this movie gave him a start and gave him a career because he's a gem. I've never met
Yeah.
him, but he makes me laugh on the internet.
The other day, I was chatting with Eduardo Sanchez, is also another one of my satanic Hispanics, but we go way back because Cubans, and he was like, "Dude, I'm directing Bruce Campbell," because I don't know what he was directing, but Bruce was in it, and he was so excited about that. But yeah,
Oh,
I
that's so
guess that's the
cool.
reaction for all of us. We had to work with him.
Just have you worked with him before, Alejandro?
No, I wish.
There's still time.
Yeah,
Well, the moment that that really works for me in this movie, and I think the reason why for the longest time I preferred this one over the second one was because it comes up to this line of the separation between what's funny and what's horrifying, and the second one kind of
Mm.
pushes past that. But every single time that one of the Deadites is sitting there and is just laughing while the violence is happening, it's so upsetting to me. Even as an adult, it always just like it makes my skin crawl because it's like it's that mix of this woman is sitting there giggling like a little kid while the most horrific things are happening. And it's when he takes Linda out to the shed and starts the chainsaw and he can't do it, and then he buries her outside and her hand bursts through and starts digging at his leg and just clawing his leg to shit, and he's like hitting her over and over again and she is just cackling and spitting up this white goop the entire time. It's that mix
no,
of this should be funny but this is also really terrifying, and the combination, I don't know whether to be terrified or to be like laughing at it. And I think that's the power of this movie for me and why I still go back to it. This is a comfort watch for me. Why I go back to it so often is that it walks up to that line and you just don't know, am I supposed to laugh or am I supposed to be terrified?
I think this one is fine to be terrified, but also how smart, now that you're mentioning that, how smart was this young Sam Raimi kid that in that scene is the opposite of the scene where he has the present for her. Like in the one with the present, she's gonna grab the present, and you see that he opens his eyes, and then she looks and he closes his eyes. And then in this one is the opposite. Like he's digging the grave, and you see her open her eyes, and he looks and she closes her eyes. So it's like, it's such a beautiful thing for such a young filmmaker. It's such a beautiful detail. I hope he does well. I think he's talented.
Yeah,
Yeah,
jury's still out
He's all right.
whether he's going to make it in his career
yeah, yeah, yeah. I think he has a future.
I think
Yeah.
so too.
Yeah.
One day.
So
Well,
I
do
am
you
curious before we wrap up. I am curious
Okay, cool.
because you
Cool,
said
cool.
Oh,
that that this
oh,
isn't.
it's been that time.
Yeah,
Time goes fast when you're talking about Evil Dead.
I know.
Hell yeah, it
Um,
does.
but you had mentioned that that this is not your favorite in the series. What is your favorite of the Evil Dead series?
Wait, let's first let me say something about the ending because I think And it's a good point to transition to your question, because I remember that the ending was one of the things that fucked me up as a kid, because
Okay.
suddenly it's over, you think he won, and then you see the point of view starting to move in the woods and go through the cabin, and you end with that shot of the camera approaching him. And suddenly, as a kid, I was like, fuck, he died. And then you see Evil Dead 2, and you're like, fuck, he's alive. And I think that's one of the reasons why I like open endings, because I always try to do that kind of open ending. I did it in One of the Dead. Mm, I think I do it in everything. Well, no, The Inheritance doesn't have that kind of, but it's a different kind of movie. But I think that's why I'm optimistic about like that kind of ending. In my head, Thelma and Louise made it.
Of
Duh,
course.
Yeah.
obviously.
Of
Yeah,
course.
and I think it's because of Evil Dead, and I want to see that sequel. But
Hell
see, it's
yeah.
like that's the thing that happens
Yeah.
when you watch Evil Dead 2, and now we can go into that. Evil Dead 2 is, of course, my favorite.
Okay.
I think my second favorite, it's a fight between the original and Army of Darkness, because Army of Darkness is
Okay.
like it brings the comedy to a whole different level. But also Army of Darkness has the "Come Get Some" line, which I have put in every movie, some like literally that one or some variation of that one. I did it in Nightmare Cinema. I did it in Satanic Hispanics. I did it in Inheritance. I did it in Apocalypse. One of the Dead does something different, but yeah, it's like I cannot help myself. Like I have to put that somewhere.
Hell yeah.
But I think Evil Dead 2 is for me the best, because that's where he was just like going crazy. He was practically inventing a new genre, um, and um, and everything that he does with the camera, with the effects, with everything is so inventing, so much fun. It's like he was having fun. He was just going crazy there. Yeah, so that's my favorite of those.
Hell yeah. Cool. All right. Well, let's wrap up and give this a rating out of 5. And Terry, we'll start with you. Terry, how many Necronomicons out of 5 do you give the original Evil Dead?
I mean, this movie's perfect. It's 5 for me. I think this is gonna be probably our easiest one. This it's just the inventiveness on display. The fact that what I think it shows what indie filmmakers can do. Granted, he had a lot of time to do it, but also granted that was probably a grueling shoot out there in the forest in that cabin, having to stay there. Because I did a little research, and they stayed at that place while they were filming, and I'm just like
Cute.
that the commitment to it. But I love this movie. I like what you said, Alejandro, where he's basically in the second one just sort of inventing a genre. It just I don't know. He's so talented, and I think that it's amazing to see in this very first going out in the woods and doing it yourself way that you know he's good and this movie is good. And so it's 5. I love this movie. This is a comfort watch. I will watch it. I'll probably watch it again this weekend. What about you, Mary Beth?
So because not only of how good it is technically and how much I just love it as a movie, but also because of the importance that it has in my own relationship and marriage, I'm gonna have to give it a 5. Again, I love Evil Dead 2 a little bit more than this one, but I still love this movie for plenty of reasons, as we've all talked about. And um I will say I have loved Sam Raimi ever since he made Spider-Man, because my little brother loved the Spider-Man movies. And then getting to see Evil Dead and realize that how ubiquitous Sam Raimi has been in my life, I can't help but give this 5. So yeah. And then Alejandro, you have the final word. How many Necronomicons do you give the original
You're
Evil
handing on.
Dead?
We're handing out Necronomicons. It has to be 5. That's the movie that brought us the Necronomicon. And by the way, it's I forgot, but it's yeah. This is perfect. It's 5 Necronomicons, and I agree with you about the second one, but also, I mean, I'm older than you. You're talking about Spider-Man. By the time I watched Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2, Army of Darkness hadn't come out yet. So I was like seeing all that stuff happen in real time, and
That's
it
so
was
cool.
it was great. Also dated me, but it's,
I mean,
yeah,
Whatever.
I'm older,
I'm from
but
the 80s. I was born in 81. So like I'm right there.
yeah, I'm a bit
I'm
older,
50.
but yeah, but yeah, it was no, that was great. And by the way, I also appreciate the new ones.
Oh, me too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I even watched them like not too long ago, like a couple of months ago. I watched both, which I have seen several times before. But yeah, I think they did a fantastic job. I still hope they 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 are fun again. You know what I mean.
Yeah, no, I
Yeah.
do. I will say though, I
Yeah.
do. Fede is still I love it so much.
No,
And
it's
because
such
of
a
how
magnificent.
fucking grueling it is. It's a
Yeah, he goes
grueling
hard.
movie.
It's
Yeah.
it's a horror movie with where there's literally raining blood at the end. It's a metal
Yeah.
album, but
Uh
yeah,
Yeah, it definitely is.
yeah.
well, thank you so much, Alejandro, for joining us to talk about The Evil Dead. Are you online? Where can the listeners find you? And the floor is yours to plug away with whatever you can talk about.
They cannot find me. I am online, but I asked all my friends. I asked my friends to change my passwords because I wanted to get off social. So for the past like 4 or 5 months, I'm still there, but I'm not there. I don't have access to it, so they cannot find me. They have to track me down. They have to hunt me. They have to have a
They have to
particular set of
fish with the
skills.
with
Yeah.
the deep throat
You
VHS.
need a particular set of skills. Yeah, exactly. You put a copy of Deep Throat. Just leave a copy of Deep Throat in a bank, like in some park, and eventually Alejandro will show up. Yeah, that's the way to do it.
Cool. That's
Oh,
the new social media.
yeah, this is terrible. That's why I don't have social media. It was a wise decision for my career because eventually you end up posting this kind of stuff. Yeah, so it was a good career move.
Oh yeah, I think
So
so.
yeah, they cannot find me. If if
Okay.
if if I come back at some point, is a Brugués on Instagram, which is the only one I was really doing lately. But yeah, I'm there, but I'm not there.
Cool.
I don't blame you
All
one
right.
bit.
Well, yeah, go follow, but don't follow
Yeah,
Alejandro.
exactly. Go follow,
Yeah,
but don't
yeah, yeah.
follow. Just get a copy of Deep Throat, and
Yeah.
I'll find you.
Like Santa.
Yeah.
Anyway, listeners, you've heard from us. We want to hear from you. What was your experience with both The Evil Dead and Deep Throat? I really want to know. I want to know both. You can send us an email you can let us know by sending us an email at scarredforlifepodcast@gmail.com, or you can reach out to us on social media. You can find me on Twitter at MB McAndrews and on Instagram at MB.McAndrews.
And you can follow me everywhere at Gaily Dreadful.
And of course, follow the podcast on Twitter and Blue Sky at Scarred Podcast and on Instagram at Scarred for Life Podcast.
And please don't forget to sorry, my cat is apparently sitting on the zero, and so it's just filling
I
up
was gonna
the
say,
document with zeros.
really
Please don't forget to
typing.
review, rate, and subscribe. And if you want to help support us, we do have a Patreon.
Thank you to Eric Power for our artwork. Thank you to Sean Keller for our music. Thank you everyone for listening. Please stay safe out there, but most importantly, stay creepy.
And until next time.